You're aware that we conducted a deposition of Mr. Bernal and Ms. Tomasini last week?
Yes, I am.
They pled the Fifth Amendment during their respective depositions. They both answered to you, correct?
For the years 2021 and 2022, yes.
You were sitting here for a voluntary transcribed interview. I'm just wondering if you have thoughts about why Ms. Tomasini and Mr. Bernal would elect to take the Fifth.
I did not discuss their appearance with them, and I do not know why they chose to exercise their constitutional rights.
Klain, I had a few questions before I leave back for my district. You mentioned that you graduated Harvard Law School in 1987. As a ballpark, how many years after that have you spent in public service?
Well, Congressman, I could do the math if you really need me to, but I'd say roughly about half my time since then has been in public service.
And I'm sure you had other classmates who made different choices. They went to law firms, they went to private equity, investment banks, all fine things to do. My guess is if you had chosen that, you would have made a lot more money. Is that fair?
I think that's fair. I think private law practice is a very important thing, too, in our country, and I don't begrudge anyone that. And I have done private law practice, both as a big firm lawyer and as an in-house lawyer for a venture capital firm and now for a major tech company. And I think people who do that also are doing something that's in the public interest, too.
Certainly. And there are Republicans who have made similar choices to you to go into public service, and anyone who makes that choice is making somewhat of a sacrifice. Is that fair?
Well, I hesitate to use the word sacrifice. People are making sacrifices to the people who are serving in our armed forces and as first responders. They're truly making sacrifices. I think that the kind of public service I did as a lawyer in the government was a chance to hopefully make a difference for the better. But you know, my family never starved, and you know, I think that you know, it was my choice.
What's up, everybody? Welcome back to the channel. Okay, so I hope the view today is better than it was yesterday. Looking at a wall behind me, now you have at least a mountainscape to view upon as you're listening to the video. Okay, so let's get into this. Okay, I promise you guys the questions are going to get a whole hell of a lot better than what was just in that intro. They're going to get pretty good, and then we're going to respond to that afterwards. But let's go back to the beginning of that. Okay, so you have no freaking clue as to why those people chose to invoke their Fifth Amendment rights. Their right to shut up, if you will. Like, hey, look, if it was me and I was in that position, I would shut up too. I wouldn't say a damn thing about any of this. I would try to stay just as silent as possible, because anything they say can and will be used against them in a court of law if charges happen to derive from any of this inquisition, if you will. And I like to call it an inquisition because it kind of is, you know, it's an inquiry into what was going on during the Biden administration. And I find this very fascinating. You have no idea. Maybe it's because everybody in the freaking world could tell that Joe Biden was mentally incapacitated. How about that? And you guys lied to everybody for 4 freaking years about that whole situation. How about that? How about, you know, we don't really know exactly what crime that is, but I'm sure there's some sort of a crime by consistently lying to the American people about factual events, right? Lying by omission, just blatantly lying outright. This is what they did over and over and over and over again, essentially on a daily basis. And we're trying to get to the bottom of this, and these people are trying to stonewall that effort right there. So I find all of this very fascinating. And like I said, folks, the questions are going to get much better. So you guys smash that like button for me. Subscribe if you're new around here. Share this video anywhere and everywhere you can. Click that join button, sign up, and become a member. That's the best way to help this channel expand and grow, folks. And I just hit that 2,000 mark. 2,000 subscribers, so we're steadily growing, folks. We're steadily expanding, and I have you guys to thank for that. So y'all do all that for me, and without any further ado, folks, here is the rest of the story.
My last question is, what do we need to do, though, to make it so that people like you who are graduating in our top institutions who have a passion for public service, whether Republican or Democrat, are choosing public service, that we're not making it so difficult for people to want to make that choice.
Well, I was very fortunate. My parents, who were both small business people, saved for my education, and I worked on Capitol Hill between college and law school and saved some money for my education. But I know that funding education is very hard, and a lot of people go into the private sector because they feel they have no choice financially. And so I've always supported, more generous grant and loan programs to encourage people from less fortunate backgrounds than mine to be able to leave their college or leave their graduate program and go into public service. Public service, again, I never felt poorly paid, but it does not pay so as well as private work does. And I think people should, I think it's in our national interest to allow people not to be financially constrained to go to big law firms or big corporations and instead have a chance to serve the public in, whether that's as prosecutors or defense attorneys or nonprofit groups or whatever. I think there's a lot of ways, or in this body as staff members, which is what I did when I first finished college, and after I finished my clerkship, I came back and worked in the Congress. And I just think that we should encourage more people to do that. I think it makes a good difference whether you're a Republican or a Democrat, and I think that cost of higher education is a real impediment to that right now.
Thank you.
Thank you, Congressman.
Good morning, Mr. Klain.
Good morning.
In the previous round, my majority colleagues asked you at length about President Biden's mental and physical condition during his term in office, as well as a number of book excerpts containing quotes attributed to you. I will get to the quotes, but I'd first, in the interest of making sure we have as clear a record as we possibly can, like to ask you generally about your assessment of President Biden's mental condition. You noted, as I understood your testimony, certain manifestations of aging in President Biden over time. Is that correct?
Yes. What I said and what I believe is that the president's rhetorical skills ebbed over time. Anyone who remembers or seen videos of his rhetorical appearances in his 1988 presidential campaign, which was the first time I worked for him, he delivered stem-winder addresses, powerful, booming, stentorian speeches that could be heard without a microphone in the back of the room, and that was his political style. And by the time he became president and throughout his presidency, he was much more soft-spoken and quiet. And I think that that's a change. But in terms of his mental acuity, I had no doubt at any time that the president was mentally fit to serve as president and mentally fit to make the decisions of president.
So mentally fit to fully and competently execute the duties of the presidency.
Absolutely, yes.
Throughout his term in office.
Throughout his term in office, yes.
Was it ever your view that President Biden was unable at any point during his term in office to make decisions about matters within the scope of his presidential duties?
Well, you said at any time, and what I'll say is there was a time, I believe in 2022, when the president had to receive anesthesia for a medical procedure. And for that brief period of time, for those couple of hours in which he was incapacitated, he handed over powers on the 25th Amendment to the vice president, who became acting president. That would be the only time I recall, yes.
So, apart from that one instance, you never held the view that President Biden was unable to execute the duties?
No, I've always believed the president was capable of executing the duties. That's my opinion, and that was based on my interactions with the president.
Did you ever have any concerns about President Biden's ability to handle significant policy matters at any point during his term in office?
No, I did not. As I explained earlier, I thought he handled one of the most difficult policy matters he faced as president in a way that showed his acuity to exceed those of most experts, which was his response to Russia's threatened invasion of Ukraine and ultimate invasion of Ukraine.
My majority colleagues asked you about certain portions of the book titled Uncharted. So I'd just like to walk through those again, just to make sure that we're completely clear as to what you did and did not mean when you spoke to the author of that book. The first quote you were asked about was in the context of the debate prep and involved the phrase "couldn't grasp what the back and forth was." And as I understood your testimony, the issue you were addressing there was President Biden's lack of preparedness. Is that accurate?
His preparedness and his lack of familiarity with what Donald Trump was saying on the campaign trail and the fact that it was getting traction with the voters.
So you were not suggesting by those words any inability on the president's part to understand what the Trump campaign had been saying?
I was not speaking to the president's mental acuity, just the state of his then current absorption of what was going on in the campaign.
And another point in the Uncharted book, there's a view attributed to you that President Biden was, quote, unaware of what was happening in his own campaign. And I take it again, you were referring to his lack of familiarity with the issues taking place on the ground in the context of the campaign. Is that fair?
That is fair. I made that clear to Mr. Whipple. I've made that clear to Mr. Whipple in subsequent conversations after the book came out.
So the words out of it are not a reference to any issue of mental acuity on the president's part?
In other words, out of it are that he was very, very aware of what was being said by NATO leaders and not really aware of what Donald Trump, his opponent in the 2024 campaign, was saying and how voters were reacting to that.
In your view, was President Biden the first presidential candidate to fall short in that respect in the context of preparing for a debate?
No. In fact, I've prepared virtually every Democratic nominee for president for their debates going back to 1992. And so I've seen this many times before. We saw this, as I mentioned earlier, with President George H.W. Bush in the first 1992 debate when I was working for then Governor Clinton. We saw this also when President George W. Bush debated Senator John Kerry in 2004. And even though Bush was substantially ahead in that race at that time, and his staff had said he would finish off Kerry that night, Kerry won the debate decisively, and the race became virtually a tie after that. So I think this is a common phenomenon that incumbent presidents face in their first debates.
I think you also mentioned during the previous round that, in your view, President Biden was excessively focused on foreign affairs at the expense of domestic policy issues. Is that accurate?
That is accurate, yes, in my view.
You, as you mentioned, you viewed him as comparable to President George H.W. Bush in that respect.
Yes.
Did you ever have a view of former President Bush as mentally infirm?
I did not, no.
You also alluded during the previous round to your view of President Biden's, as I understood it, strong command of foreign affairs. Is that
yes.
fair? He understood foreign affairs at a high level of expertise.
Yes.
And that was the case throughout his presidency.
Yes.
Would it be fair to say that President Biden had a stronger command of foreign affairs than many public servants significantly younger than him?
Yes, as I explained with regard to the invasion of Ukraine, there were many global leaders, including President Zelensky and President Macron, who were obviously both younger than President Biden, who were just absolutely confident that Putin was not going to invade. You could have turned on television and seen any number of former military leaders or other pundits saying, this is crazy, it's not going to happen. And it did happen, and President Biden always believed it would happen.
There was also discussion concerning what I understood to be a different perspective on your part and on the president's part concerning messaging surrounding the concept of bridges and jobs. The president,
yes.
in your telling, was very focused on that message. You had a different view. So the issue there, as I understood it, was, again, a difference in perspective between yourself and President Biden. Is that accurate?
That is accurate, yes. And as I said before, I think that part of his view was hardwired as service in this body, where kind of delivering pork for the district is seen as a major part of someone's job. I don't think that's what people were looking for in a president, and I thought it was an ineffective message for a presidential campaign.
So if I'm understanding correctly, you did not attribute the president's view in that instance to any lack of mental capacity?
No, I attribute it to habits developed over decades of service in the United States Congress.
Okay, folks, there's a lot to break down right there, and we're going to break some of this down again, as a matter of fact. So, all right, let's back it up to when he was talking about foreign affairs. And Joe Biden was, once again, performing at such a high level, and his IQ was over 9,000. Well, how come there were all these blunders, like especially with Afghanistan? That was an utter failure. Joe Biden committed one of the worst atrocities in American history, if you will, by pulling the troops out, by giving up Bagram Air Force Base and allowing 13 Marines to get killed by a jihadist, if you will. Like, that was one of the most epic failures in American history, and you mean to tell me that you think, oh, well, that's just normal, that's standard Biden just operating at such a high level? Look, I'm not going to believe any of this. This is all lies. And for some reason, I don't know if we're going to hold any of these people to account for any of these lies, because they are clearly lies. Joe Biden clearly fumbled the ball, like badly, like well beyond what is just a standard fumble, right? We saw like failure after failure after failure just in Afghanistan. It was bad decision after bad decision after bad decision, right? Like Joe Biden took the plan, the withdrawal plan, and just crumbled it up, threw it in the freaking trash, and said, I want to do it this way. Pushed it back until 9/11 to make some sort of weird statement to the terrorists, like, you bombed us on 9/11, and now we're pulling out on 9/11, 20-something years later, right? It was a bad message. I don't know who thought that was a good idea to do. That, like, yeah, let's do it on the anniversary of 9/11. Yeah, that was just retarded, if you ask me. Completely retarded. Like, nobody could tell Joe Biden that this is not a good maneuver. How about let's stick to the plan? But because it was Donald Trump, they said, no, we're going to throw that in the trash and just create a new one. Right? Giving up Bagram Air Force Base was one of the dumbest ideas, I think, in military history. Like, yeah, I know, it's kind of a hyperbolic statement, but even still, let's say modern American military history. Okay, so that's all really, really dumb. We know the failures of the Afghanistan withdrawal. It was worse than withdrawing from Vietnam, as a matter of fact, and we know how much of a blunder that was. It's just a catastrophe in the making. All right, so this was well beyond that, and that was all Joe Biden. We saw testimony from the House Armed Services Committee and the Senate Armed Services Committee of some of the military commanders making suggestions that we do it the way we planned. In other words, the way Trump planned to do it. And Joe Biden, from the top down, said, no, we're not going to do it this way. So once again, ish rolls right uphill when it comes to this. So who is going to be held to account for this? Nobody, apparently, right? Nobody was ever fired. Nobody was court-martialed or demoted or anything like that. Nobody was forced to retire. None of those things. As a matter of fact, some of those people got promoted. Like, once again, the Democratic Party is the only party where you can fail your way to the top, folks. Look at Kamala Harris. I mean, Kamala Harris got in the 2020 presidential election and bombed pretty badly and got a vice presidency out of the deal. It's like, the Democratic Party just doesn't make any sense to me because they are absolutely divorced from logic. But let's get back to some of those other statements, right? Now, talking about Joe Biden's firmality, if you will, how infirm he was. Oh, they say that wasn't it. The fact that he couldn't rhetorically absorb anything of what the arguments that the Trump administration were making. He couldn't absorb those. That doesn't speak to Joe Biden's mental incapacitation. No, that just speaks to he didn't know anything. Like, what are you trying to say? Like, you can't get out from underneath that. You said that, my dude. And what that means, that doesn't mean that Joe Biden just didn't know what was going on. Like, hang on just a second. We're talking about a campaign. Joe Biden is the candidate. Don't you think he should know what the arguments are from the other side? Don't you think he should be absorbing these things? I mean, the guy said it himself. He was falling asleep during debate prep. The guy didn't understand the arguments. And you mean to tell me that does not speak to his mental capabilities? You don't think he was failing just a little bit because of that? I mean, once again, we can go back and look at clip after clip after clip after clip of Joe Biden mentally fumbling all over the place, right? And that's being nice. He was making some very, very dumb mistakes, if you ask me, in my opinion, and most people's opinion. But these people are trying to posit that, no, Joe Biden was operating at such a high level that you just don't understand what he was doing. Or when he would freeze up, he was actually formulating all kinds of things right there. He was calculating gravitation, for crying out loud, while he was also making up an argument to come back with. That wasn't him just freezing up because he's getting old and clearly senile. No, that wasn't it at all. What you saw was fake. It was just cheap fakes. That's what they tried to tell us over and over and over and over and over again. Oh, that's just cheap fakes. That's just out of context clips, right? Like, no, I'm sorry. Let me debunk that right fast. Out of context clips is when you take something that Trump says, like, there's good people on both sides, and you take out the part where he says, except for the neo-Nazis and the white supremacists, because they should be condemned totally. That was such an effective, cheap fake, out of context clip, that there are people in America till this day that still think that Donald Trump said that Nazis and white supremacists were very fine people. Yeah, some people still believe that, folks. That's how effective that was. But once again, debunking this, okay, when you take a video clip of Joe Biden stuttering through an entire sentence, making up new words like Truna shot under pressure, or beta calf care, or saying, let me start but with 2 words made in America, when he says things like this isn't high level stuff. This guy clearly has some sort of disconnection in his brain to where it's not functioning properly, especially when he doesn't catch those fumbles. And he didn't catch those fumbles, right? Making up new words, that is something that Webster's laboratory does, right? That is not something the President of the United States does whilst on stage. Like, these people are still trying to pull the wool over our eyes and still trying to tell us that Joe Biden was just fine. As a matter of fact, according to Ron Klain, Joe Biden should have stayed in the campaign. He said that multiple times. He should have stayed in the campaign. It's like, well, are you serious? Like, we saw the debate. Okay, at that point, the clothes were off. The emperor was naked and everybody could see it. And you're still trying to put on airs that, no, that he just had a cold. That's all that was. He was just feeling bad. I'm sorry, feeling bad does not cause you to say that you beat Medicare and not catch that. And only to have Trump come in and say, yeah, you beat it half to death. Like, once again, you go through that debate and it's over and over and over and over again. People that are mentally capable of performing at high levels do not make mistakes like that. Sure, they may slip up on a word here or there, right? It's a high level debate. But they don't do it repeatedly throughout the entire night. They'll have good moments, they'll have bad moments. Even if you have a cold. Look, I'm sorry, having a cold does not make you not think, right? It makes you a little bit sluggish. It makes your voice kind of like this, where it sounds like your nose is clogged up, because it is. It does not make you mentally not be able to understand the arguments that are going on. It's all silly, if you ask me. Every single bit of this is completely silly, and I don't understand what exactly is going to come from this. Are we going to actually hold these people to account? What crimes have they committed? I am sure there is some sort of crime behind all of this. It's figuring out what that is referring all of this to the Justice Department and let the Justice Department figure out what the crime is and let the punishment fit whatever that may be. That's what I say. Hopefully that's what they do. It's hard to say if the Trump administration will actually do this because we have been seeing some pushback on the swamp, right? Like going after Comey, Letitia James, and these people. But the swamp is a massive network of swamp creatures, if you will. And yeah, it's going to be hard to go after all these people. Many of them are still in positions of power, so we'll have to see how this all plays out. But I think that's all I got. So you guys let me know what y'all think about all this down in the comment section. Once again, I find it very fascinating that these people are still trying to put up airs, right? Pull the curtain back up for some reason and try to show us that, hey, hang on, the show still must go on, right? Joe Biden's fine. He's completely fine. He should be president right now. I think that's ridiculous. Like, why not just come out and tell the truth? I don't get it. Maybe you guys have I don't know, some insight into this. Maybe you guys can fill me in, for crying out loud. Like, once again, I'm not the smartest guy. I'm just an idiot, right? I just happen to notice things. That's it. But you guys don't forget to smash that like button for me. Subscribe if you're new around here. Share this video anywhere and everywhere you can. Click the join button. Sign up and become a member. That is the best way to help this channel expand and grow, folks. And just remember out there, folks, that, look, Jesus died on the cross to pay the price for our sin. That's amazing. That's just blatantly amazing. That's just one of the most amazing things, one of the most amazing aspects to being a Christian, right? And if you're ever feeling down, feeling bad, just speak to God. That's all you got to do. And God will show you the way through actions, folks. He will pull you out of whatever you were in, bring you right out of depression, whatever that may be. If you're going a little paranoid or whatever, pull you right out of that before it gets too bad, folks. But you must have faith and speak to God. But enough of my preaching, right? So you guys, like I said, y'all do all that for me. Y'all try to have a good day. Stay legitical. Peace.